Who are the Vikings? Myth and legend has painted the Vikings as brutish men from Scandinavia, with blonde hair, blue eyes, lots of hairy chests and horned helmets. They use axes, yes axes, tools for cutting down trees as their main weapons. They terrorized the world, fought trolls, discovered lands, pillaged, raped and murdered, founded empires, dynasties, rode dragons, worshipped a superhero and did an awful lot of farming. But how much of this is true, and how do we separate the truth from a myth? Well, if you're fans of the epic history series Vikings or the Netflix series The Last Kingdom, you may have some idea that the Vikings were real people who did real things. Not just the mythical, violent, hairy men in Europe, but real men, and often women, who did as much to influence European culture and history as any other pan-European civilization. So let's start at the beginning. The actual people we know as the Vikings were a group of loosely homogeneous Germanic tribes that fit into the European macro-history as part of early Germanic history, beginning around 1200 BC. The first record we have of them is from the Romans, who were attacked by Germanic warriors from the Jutland Peninsula in 113 to 101 BC. They did wear horned helmets, but only for religious purposes by religious leaders, and never in battle. The Germanic tribes were one of the ethno-linguistic groups that supplanted early Celtic settlements in Europe, and were distinct in language and culture to the Roman Latins, the Greco-Turkic Eastern civilizations, the Slavs, and the Finno-Ugric peoples. The word Viking comes from the Old Norse word vikingur, which means raider or pillager, from the Old word vika, or sea mile. It became a nickname for Scandinavian sea raiders. Old Norse is the language group the Norse people spoke, Norse here meaning north, since the early Norsemen settled far northern Europe. They worshipped a pantheon of pagan or nature gods, similar to the Greeks and Romans, and many of our days of the week are named after them. Tuesday comes from Tyr's Day, Wednesday comes from Odin's Day, Thursday comes from Thor's Day, Friday comes from Frigga Day or Freya Day. The Germanic warriors that settled Kattegat became strong seafaring warriors. They were related to their Germanic cousins, the Angles, Saxons, Frisians and Utes. These settlers lived in harsh conditions and often fought each other for land and food in the resource-scarce environment. They bred harsh men and fierce warriors. They had a complex political structure and governed themselves in earldoms, which were ruled by earls as elected officials. The Norse became excellent shipbuilders and seafarers. They often raided settlements close to shores and rivers throughout the Baltic and Scandinavia after exhausting their own resources. Eventually, their seafaring skills were enough to get them to the British Isles, France and Russia, and soon they were raiding all over Europe. They built up land and wealth relatively quickly and began what many now call the Viking Age. The Norse did a lot of raiding, but only settled a handful of lands. Notable examples being the far north of Scandinavia, England, Scotland, Ireland, the Faroe and Shetland Islands, Iceland, Greenland, Normandy and Finland. Notable historical periods include the Norse rule in Russia, then called Kievan Rus, England during the Danelaw, Ireland from Dublin Bay, Normandy in France, and other sporadic short-lived settlements in the coastal cities and towns. The Norse main enemies were the Anglo-Saxons and later Franks of the south, the Celts of the British Isles, the Anglo-Saxons of the British Isles, the Rus, and other Baltic peoples. Famous Vikings include Rollo, the first ruler of Normandy, Eric the Red settled Greenland, Leif Erikson discovered the New World, Canute the Great, England's first Norse king, William the Conqueror, a Viking descendant, Ragnar Lothbrok, invader of England and France, Björn Ironside, legendary king of Sweden, Rurik, prince of Russia, and Olaf Tryggvason, who brought Christianity to Scandinavia. The Viking Age came to an end sporadically in the 11th century, with failed attempts at reconquest of lost land in the British Isles, and the spread of Christianity, which helped cement the modern nation-states of Sweden, Norway, Denmark and Iceland, and the beginning of the medieval period. Norse language and culture is still found today in lands once inhabited by the Vikings, such as the British Isles. Iceland and the Faroe Islands still use Norse languages and are considered Nordic nations, and countries like Finland and Greenland still carry a large influence from their Scandinavian heritage, with Nordic ethnic minorities in both countries. Norway, Sweden and Denmark still shared a common language until the 16th century, when each region began to diverge in spelling and pronunciation to three distinct but highly mutually intelligible languages today, forming what's known as a dialect continuum. Where shall we go to next? The Egyptians? The Mongols? Maybe Japan? Stay tuned for more videos. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and if you're really inclined to help the Brief History project, you can support me on Patreon.